So, hi everyone. Welcome to today's discussion on Pluto in the 10th house of the astrological chart, or Pluto in Capricorn. And what I'm going to talk about is the nature of how this archetypal structure works within the realms of evolutionary astrology, and sharing with you some of my own understandings and inner thoughts around how you as a practicing astrologer can understand how this works in other people's charts, and just bringing my own perspective on it as well, which doesn't really vary that much, to be honest, but just a new way of looking at it, especially through the natural zodiac. So just to talk to you about that today, and I have my own personal chart up because I have a 10th house Pluto, and I've shared with this many times, so I'm not going to go over the same themes again as I've done in the past, but just a way of kind of maybe relating right at the end. And I would want to actually spend quite a lot of time with any of you that have got questions for me related to this archetype. So if you have got some questions for me, I'd really I'm going to specifically try and keep this this conversation for half the time, and then hear from everybody else, because I like being able to respond as well. So okay, so Pluto in the 10th house of the astrological chart, I think it's really important for us to firstly to get a deep grasp on the nature of Pluto itself, and because of the way in which it obviously operates through an archetype, Jupiter through the 10th house, or Saturn through the 10th house, or Uranus through the 10th house, manifests slightly different in that sense, especially as Jeffrey writes about it in his own book. Pluto represents the nature of the soul in evolutionary astrology, and it represents the unresolved desires that we bring into this lifetime, the emotional complexes, the deepest core aspects of ourselves that allow us to embrace life. Basically, it is what is the causal factor for the way in which we move through this time-space experience. And whenever Pluto transits a house, and we have that natally in our chart, of course, the deepest unconscious emotional material is going to naturally move through us. And when Pluto manifests itself in the 10th house of the astrological chart, at its core level, we're dealing with a soul that has come to learn about the nature of taking responsibility for its own life, being able to understand what self-determination means. And I think self-mastery is a very deep key to the experience that souls that have Pluto in the 10th house, okay? Additionally, on top of that, karmically speaking as well, the main intention is, in other words, the polarity point. And the polarity point just simply means the 180-degree opposite side of wherever Pluto sits in your chart. So in this case, with Pluto in the 10th house, we're dealing with Pluto's polarity point being in the 4th of the astrological chart. Okay. And so the intention here with this Pluto in the 4th house destination is to develop an inner sense of identity that is related to a way in which we identify ourselves as our emotional self, and not as the existential reality that that society defines itself through. And of course, I'll be a lot more clearer on this and what I mean by that through my PDF descriptions. But just to start us off with, Pluto represents the nature of the soul. It represents the nature of these unconscious emotional desires, and it's a very long stream of experiences that we have throughout our life that shapes and navigates us. So to me, it's a very profound thing to understand. And of course, for many of you that are sitting here, evolutionary astrologers, you understand this concept. But for those that are, of course, watching this for the first time, to contemplate the nature of Pluto in your astrology chart is something that I highly recommend and encourage in a very intense way, because it does give you a very profound sense of understanding regarding what actually happens to you on a consistent basis throughout your life. transits come and go as an example, but the Pluto polarity point and its placement really does define the core structure of what is manifesting for you. So let me move over to the slides over here and actually then bring into awareness what Pluto in the 10th house represents. Now, we do this over here. It was quite a while ago. I had created a series of Pluto books, and this picture when I really tuned into Pluto in the 10th house of the astrological chart was immensely profound for me. It captures the archetype, the nature of the soul's journey in such a profound way, and this picture really does draw a lot of attention to it. So the first thing that I want to really open up with is that if we have a look at this picture comes from the Star Wars episodes, and this is Anakin Skywalker over there, and really what this represents firstly is that Capricorn in itself, the Pluto through Capricorn in the 10th house, represents a soul in which they are learning about the nature of maturity, the nature of evolving through life, in which they take responsibility for their lives. They develop a deep internal relationship towards evolving through the structures in which we as human beings govern ourselves. And the hierarchy that is evolved and that is put in place as a way of governing the community, or in this particular instance, the city, or in other particular instances, the actual, like, how do I put this across? Not the community in that sense, but the globe. Like on a global level, we have governmental structures that basically put out and govern us, and we have these laws and regulations and rules that we abide by. And there is a development of those rules and regulations and laws, and that comes through a sort of circle of people that have this deep internal need to want to evolve through responsibility. Okay, so you have this responsibility archetype so deeply infused within the unresolved emotional complexes that a Pluto 10th house soul carries with them, and it manifests through this desire for wanting to be successful, wanting to climb the social ladder and develop a social position in which there is a deep empowerment process in which their own power gets exercised, Pluto, through the structures in which societies govern themselves through, Capricorn. Okay. And karmically speaking, this is the type of, this is what this picture brings out with Anakin sitting over there, is that part of the karmic dynamic that we carry forward with us, the Pluto 10th house souls, is we have these lifetimes in which we make these incredibly strong and empowering decisions that leave us with this very deep unconscious feeling of guilt in certain situations. And the reason why that this picture is so profound, specific here, is that the responsibility and burden that comes with the trajectory of a Pluto 10th house soul as it desires to evolve itself through the social structures as a way of accepting and understanding empowerment, and then leading to this place of exercising power in authority, is that certain decisions that have to be made regarding the governments of human beings or of a community or of the structures, and so can be ones in which the choices lead to circumstances that exactly that they create this deep internal guilt. So an example that I loved that really captures this image quite a lot is of a captain that has to make a decision for his platoon, as an example, or he's on a ship and he has to make a decision because the responsibility of the destination or whatever is going to happen to them, they're under a situation that requires somebody that's got a deep internal desire for responsibility to take the fall, as it were. and he makes a choice, and that choice lands up to being correct. And this leaves this deep burden of responsibility in which people's lives were at stake, and now this has happened. And there is a very, very profound experience with Pluto 10th house souls in which the development of understanding their emotional reality relative to these desires is what leads this intense contemplation, in which there is it's almost like a realization of how their actions and how the expectations that are placed on them and how they ask for expectations in an unconscious way through the desire for responsibility leads us to understand the deeper internal process of why responsibility, why success, why the desire for power is evolving through us. And we can sit with this, and especially when you work with a lot of people that carry a lot of guilt or shame, but generally guilt in that sense. And there is a difference between the natural guilt and the man-made guilt, which I'll clarify in the rest of the slides. But this natural guilt of knowing that you've done something wrong and it's all your fault, as a way of feeling remorse, as an example, a natural guilt. Anyway, the point is the burden that sits on your shoulder. So the head hangs here and he's looking down in deep contemplation about the nature of the rules and regulations that are there to support and structure and govern. Now, part of what I'm sharing right now has got a very dark, shadowy reflection to how this archetypal structure and Pluto soul dynamic works. And the reason why I begin with this is because when we initiate ourselves into an evolutionary dynamic, we are not evolved to understand those things. So we have to go through the shadow dynamics first, which naturally creates the karmic dynamics in which all of our mistakes, as it were, we are obviously accountable for. And with Pluto in the 10th house souls, the accountability of that is even more intensified because there's such a profound burden that we carry around the expectations of others and the promises in which we lay on the community as a way of empowering us to the position. And that's something else that I'll also talk about, is the nature of how the natural way in which the Pluto 10th house soul is establishing power, and the more Plutonic process of just bulldozing through the experience and reaching power through just might, which of course is not what the Pluto 10th house soul is trying to accomplish, which is what you will naturally understand as you develop a deeper relationship to your soul's journey over many lifetimes with the signature. Anyway, so this contemplation, this deep internal process in which there is a very, very if you look at the chairs over here, this is a council, okay? This is a council of elders in which they sit around a table, as it were, or around a circle, in which they contemplate the nature of the choices and actions and rules and regulations that govern the societies. And this council, as it were, is also a deep, profound reflection on the nature of Pluto's transits, or Pluto's movement as a soul through the 10th house, is that it is maturity. It is emotional development through growth. It is emotional self-responsibility. It's emotional, the ability to relate in a mature way through growth. And because Capricorn is an earth sign, and it is, considered the third in the development of earth signs in themselves, we're looking at how we take responsibility for our lives, the choices we make, and the actions and consequences that lead to those, and then the self-mastery. So as we develop through our age, as we develop through our time, Capricorn reflects time, okay, we begin to find ourselves as elders in positions where wisdom has become the way in which the true power of the Capricorn / Pluto and Capricorn archetype manifests through, which is that you are a council of elders. So you become the parent, you become the guide, you become the natural boundary maker that allows for the nurturance of the younger, underdeveloped, developing emotional growth people, as well as, you know, whoever else is going through life. And so this is the point of the evolutionary dynamics and intention with the Pluto 10th house soul, is to develop over a period of time, through many lifetimes, a role in which they are the father figure, and that there is a natural transition. And we'll talk about patriarchy as an influence of in the Pluto and 10th house souls, but that the fundamental archetype as a developing experience for a Pluto 10th house soul is to reach a point in which they are the guides, they are the fathers, they are the ones that are nurturing the true natural expression of Capricorn, which is to guide, and that is to allow to be the parental and father figure as a way of just carrying that wisdom, as I say. So the council is nurturing the growth process of the community. And the natural evolutionary intention for any 10th house Pluto is to initiate the desire to be successful and to be recognized in a social way through the nurturing of groups of people that are desiring and wanting to be looked after, and to have structures put in place as a developmental phase of evolution. So one thing that I find really, really fascinating, and I've said this to Linda before, that she is a 10th house Pluto, and I hope it's okay that I'm mentioning this to, you know, to the people right now, but you have manifested this along with some other people as well, of course, this EA Zoom meeting experience. And I feel that this is a wonderful platform structure, Capricorn, in which your soul has manifested an opportunity for growing evolutionary astrologers, as well as astrologers that have been working through their lives. You're attracting so many people that are like-minded to this place as a way of nourishing their creative gifts, in which they desire to probably bring out into the world. And to me, as a Pluto 10th house soul, I recognize this platform that you've created as such a beautiful community, in which consistently all the time, the work that you put in to support this, that allows the rest of us to be able to nurture and grow, like I said. And to me, and you've got your own council as well, that naturally has their own roles to play in that. So that is that honestly is probably the most clearest way in which I can express what I've been talking about for the last like 10 to 15 minutes on the nature of Pluto in the 10th house. It's a soul that deeply desires to nurture and grow, and basically facilitate the development of younger people. And that's why politicians themselves, in my opinion, correlate to that kind of Pluto 10th house experience, because at some point their intention is to look after a community or a society or a group of people that are wanting their voices to be heard. And of course, naturally speaking, the voices is what puts the people, the Pluto 10th house politician, in power. And so that is another reason as to why the Pluto 10th house soul's evolutionary dynamic lessons as a way of spiritualization is to realize that it is not manifesting the desire for the top of the this highest position, Capricorn, through pure power, but the ability to give the power to the people, and then through the people have the elevation given to the Pluto 10th house soul, as the Pluto 10th house soul is recognized as the one that wants to lead. So these natural leadership roles manifest through Pluto 10th house souls because of this natural recognition. Okay, whereas the shadowy aspect is making dodgy deals, making dodgy, when I say dodgy, like unhealthy expectations, lies, and generally what you would see from a politician. Again, not all politicians are bad, but you can absolutely associate the relatability to politicians promising things and they're not following through, because the nature of power has now been achieved. And so the exercising of that power over the people has already been established, which is of course to me, I feel like at least at one point, each Pluto 10th house soul has lived that experience. I know I have at some point in my early 20s. Jeffrey talks about in the book where he says that Pluto 10th house souls will naturally identify a person that is in a position of power and then merge with them as a way of recognizing the power, and then through that develop a high position, but that position has not been naturally nurtured in growth. So as he didn't speak about it in this terms, I've kind of veered off course here a little bit in terms of my explanation, but the process of getting to the top is not natural. And it's very easy for us to identify exactly how social situations and positions work, because it's naturally attuned for our Pluto to look at where is empowerment and disempowerment. So what happens here, karmically speaking, is there's an actual block. There's a natural block that Pluto 10th house souls can experience. And I've had my fair share of blocks in my life in which the nature of the Pluto desire to reach the success has actually been completely blocked. And it's, pushed me onto different courses of direction in life. And I feel like that's one thing that's really important to recognize, is that if you are, and you do come across any people that have got Pluto 10th house, they are going to at some point feel that block in which the outside world has prevented them from achieving whatever it is that they wanted to achieve. And that was just to basically say there's more stuff here that needs to be developed. And of course, as well, it's an important opportunity to create what is called the emotional shocks. So I'm going to go on to the next part of my slides over here. And I just want to ask Linda. Linda, can you share with me quickly how much time there is? Or maybe I'll just...
Yes, Simon, you have about 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So, Pluto Capricorn. There's these three slides. Let's just move that over there. Okay, these three slides, or three pictures, pardon me. And the first one is the nature of structure. Pluto, or Capricorn in itself, reflects the nature of structure, the way in which things are held together, the way in which we naturally, and again, this is what I'm talking about here, the Pluto soul wants to evolve through the nature of structure, the 10th house, and the societal structures. So in order to experience the natural empowerment process, the integration within societal structures is very important for the Pluto 10th house soul. And karmically speaking, there will be a natural dynamic in which that is very sensitive to them. I know from my own personal life that is absolutely the case. And empowerment comes because there is a desire to want to influence those structures, Pluto, and change them and metamorphosize them. And so by a natural desire, there is a need to integrate within the society structures and how those are bound together. You see in this picture over here that there's this bonding, there's this binding, there is the way in which there is limitations that keep things safe and secure. And this is another thing, of course, that is very, very greatly associated with the 10th house Pluto experience. And that comes through the nature of creating safety and security. The polarity point, of course, is Cancer. Again, the polarity point being the opposite side of Pluto in Capricorn. And so we're dealing with the process of structures and boundaries and rules and regulations and laws that are essentially, in its purest form, there to protect us from the dangers of the world. And that's where the responsibility comes in with the Pluto Capricorn soul, is that there's a natural desire to want to protect. There's a natural desire to want to look after and father in that way. So we're attuned to taking matters that are at situations in our lives and in other people's lives and saying, hey, this wasn't fair for this person over here. And there's a kind of like father role that naturally gets played. And pardon me, I feel that as any Pluto 10th house soul is naturally developing through their lives, this becomes even more empowering as the older they get. And I feel like it's really important to recognize that with any Capricorn signature, but particularly with Pluto through the 10th house, your greatness does come through time. You are maturing through time. You are maturing through the experience of time and space. So you're recognizing your choices as they reflect the nature of the time it takes in order for those natural laws of the movement of those choices to unfold, right? So if you make a choice, how long does it take for that to complete itself as a karmic dynamic, and so on and so forth. So you're learning about the relationship of time. And if you look at this picture over here, again, the structures reflect that. They reflect something that is moving through space. They reflect something that is got boundaries and something that keeps us safe. And it's an interesting contemplation to have during Pluto's transit through Capricorn today in the world, and how it is activating within inside of ourselves this process of fear and control, right? Another dynamic on a shadowy perspective regarding Pluto 10th house souls is that in way of initiating control, Pluto correlates to, Capricorn correlates to control in its unnatural form. And it's simply because the structures are there to hold things together as a way of keeping us safe. But that also means at the same time that those boundaries create limitations. And those limitations, when are interfacing with something that requires freedom or a more Uranian energy that requires that breaking through experience, we immediately are met with the boundaries. We immediately are met with those limitations. And that can create, of course, the duality here, this safety and security, which you see in consensus reality. That is why they vote for governments to put in place. And that's why you'll notice that many governments will always advertise the protection and the safety and security of certain things, because immediately consensus reality, which is ruled by Capricorn, needs that feeling of boundaries in place as a way of not falling off the edge. Think about it. Would you walk across a bridge that's 100 meters long without any side railing? Well, think of the side railing as the Capricorn energy that is holding the journey that you're about to embark on this bridge, that is swaying from left and right to keep you safe. So, and you would naturally, on a psychological level, not even consider walking across the bridge that has no boundaries on the left and right hand side, or arm rest on the right hand side. So there is a control factor that plays here. But of course, within patriarchy, and especially in which the masculine form has developed over the last 6,000 years in humanity, we've evolved through some really, really interesting times, and particularly with the Virgo Pisces axis. And for any of you that are not knowing what I'm talking about over here, I won't go too deeply into it, but we're dealing with the nature of religion being a form of control, because religion offers safety and security to those that are unable to relate to the phenomena of reality in a way that helps them understand the universe. So religion is a structure that is in place in which they have their father figure. So that would be represented through the archetypal experience of God, Jesus as the representation of the Savior in that sense, and then how we on a deep psychological and emotional level relate to the archetype of the father, as the father represents the laws that we are governed by. So again, God has these governing laws, religion has these governing laws in which we abide by, and that keeps us safe. But unfortunately, in a sort of dominating, very controlling Plutonic way that is deeply about empowerment, Pluto 10th house souls, as well as governmental structures, can elicit deep experiences of fear as a way of creating control. Because again, we're all free spirits, and we've all done this to some point, to maybe our children at least once. I know I have, at least, where I've said to them, okay, if you don't do this, then I'm taking away that. And immediately you can see that their innocence has been threatened by something that's been taken away as a way of controlling their actions. And governments do this to us, of course, as well on a massive scale. And we, on some level, have had that happen to us relative to patriarchy as well. So we carry a lot of fear around the distorted masculine in that sense. Anyway, so fear and control is a very big part of the Pluto 10th house experience, because there is another element here that needs to be integrated, and that is that the reflection, the water archetype, the emotions, okay? And this is something that's really key here. Emotions are something that Capricorn essentially doesn't like initially, because it reflects the sea, it reflects the ocean. Now in this picture over here, you can see it's relatively calm. And that's what the Pluto 10th house soul is actually looking to seek within himself, is the calmness of his emotions as a way of developing the ability to be in control. Yet, ironically, the rough seas of emotional shocks that they endure during their life, as well as emotional experiences, puts them in a state in which they need to control those things, and then the structures that put in place. So fear naturally manifests, and control and dominance naturally manifest through the laws and regulations that keep us safe from emotional realities that we don't understand or have any awareness of how to deal with. So what I find fascinating is that we have a world right now where Pluto is transiting through Capricorn. And a lot of the Pluto and Virgo souls, and of course, souls afterwards as well, they're dealing a lot with the realization that a lot of their emotions through society's conditioning on a social structure has led us to not acknowledge emotional reality. And the masculine form, as well as patriarchy, has completely suppressed the emotional reality. And you can even see this as in war, and in particular with any forms of military souls, especially dating back like maybe 300 years, that we wore metal armor around us. And the metal armor that is around us is the Capricorn archetype. It's the protection in which we are having on ourselves as a way of preventing the missiles. And remember, when we look at a masculine energy, it is moving forward, is a penetrating energy. So when you look at the development of an arrow or a bullet or any form of missile, any form of weaponry development, it has a very strong propelling force of one direction. And we, as human beings, in order for us to protect ourselves from this sort of like patriarchal masculine developmental aggression phase that we've gone through as human beings, is we've created these metal armor shields, right? The knights, as it were. But really what that was about was about the Capricorn energy operating through the realization that the human body is very, very sensitive and very, very vulnerable and needs protection from such things. And, going forward in life, when we experience our emotions, we're deeply vulnerable. We tend to, when somebody's crying, we hand them a tissue as fast as possible to say, there. Whereas that would be a Pluto 10th house experience, like suppress the emotions, don't allow them to come out, because when they come out, then there's all, emotions all over the place, water's all over the place. And that is not what Capricorn wants. It wants control. It wants structure. It wants things to be in a very nice and ordered, well-defined place. So control naturally manifests, and dominance naturally manifests as a way of creating the stability that's needed. And again, it's a paradox, because on one hand, it's essential for that to happen. Otherwise, we would live in consistent anarchy. But the process of doing that in itself is not a nurturing one. So we end up having suppressed emotions that leads to all sorts of social dysfunction, in which we see in the world today regarding drug abuse and everything else, disassociation. So it's just a very profound thing to recognize about the Pluto 10th house souls journey, and also Pluto and Capricorn as a representation of where we are today as a collective, as we're trying to purify our emotions, especially this last full moon that just happened right now. I'm sure everybody on some level had an interesting experience of it. Okay, on an emotional level, lots of wounds being triggered. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just run through the archetype of Capricorn and Pluto here, just to kind of show you what's happening. There's a natural trinity or trine that happens with the Earth signs. You've got Taurus here, Virgo here, and Capricorn. And I just want to show you how the natural zodiac works with the Pluto 10th house soul, the mechanics. So any Pluto 10th house soul, of course, is evolving through Capricorn, but is deeply influenced by the Taurus archetype, which is the relativity of our self-worth, our abundance, our capacity to feel as if we have resources. And then Virgo, which is the process of our competence, our capacity to be nurturing and growing, and our ability to consistently keep on growing in that way. So the Pluto 10th house soul is influenced by the type of abundance and resources he can bring to his career, to his life, to his work. And of course, the competence that he brings to the process. Now, that is one way of that expression. The other one, of course, is the more like spiritual experience of the Pluto 10th house soul. And because Capricorn reflects a feminine energy in the masculine world, it's all go out there and get a career. Whereas I feel like the Pluto 10th house soul is actually trying to evolve through the nature of nurture, and then later on come out into the world as a guide, and to help provide with safety and security as a way of taking on bigger roles. And so this is a process of deep internalization around the nature of their own emotional reality through their relationship to themselves, which is the Taurus archetype. And then, of course, the Virgo represents the nature of that purification, the nature of purifying themselves and growing and naturally going through experiences and gestating and allowing time to evolve their direction and to evolve their maturity and to evolve the abundance that they carry. So there's an externalization of this abundance, which is my credentials, and that's a Pluto 10th house soul still seeking that unresolved material going out into the world. And then there's the return, which is more about the internal process of gestating and understanding what time is about and understanding the deep internal growth and maturation process that naturally comes through without even needing to do anything other than just to watch and experience life and to grow through response, to respond to life. Okay. And I know that I did say that I wanted to speak to a lot of people, so there's only two more slides left, and then hopefully I'll have enough time. So the tension and evolutionary dynamics that naturally manifest through a Pluto 10th house soul. And the first one, of course, is the opposition to the Cancer archetype. And I've spoken in depth about this opposition, the polarity point, the need for emotional integration as a way of developing a self-identity that is linked with their actual emotional reality, not the one that is defined through society's expectations, rules, and definitions. So a Pluto 10th house soul, evolutionary speaking, because Capricorn is a cardinal energy and initiates change, it is a soul that is initiating a change in this lifetime. And so that's why I think that there is general blocks that happen as a way of the soul adjusting and having necessary emotional shocks that leads it to the internalization of its emotions to then begin to manifest from the inside out, not from the outside in. So the development of a Pluto 10th house is to say, hi, my name's Simon, and I'm an MD of science and identify myself as a scientist. That's the 10th house Pluto externalization. Whereas a way of understanding the 4th house is, hi, my name's Simon, and I like to heal people as a way of expressing my compassion for a community, as an example. And so my career or definition extensionally is a doctor. You see that there is an identification of the process in which that leads the soul to the outside career path. And so when you can integrate that, there's a relatability to the emotions, which is the key factor here. Now, because again, it's cardinal, we have Aries and Libra, the expectations and demands that manifest through the 10th house manifests through the square from Libra, other people's expectations, other people's you're wanting to take on the responsibility of others as a way of nurturing. And that can become something that can become very burdensome. And at some point, because the Pluto 10th house soul desires to want to do this, they also take on too much. And Pluto 10th house souls will take on so much because they can do everything, because just put it on my shoulders, man, I can carry it all. Pardon me. Until a point in which they reach the need for Aries, which is the other tension aspect. And this is like complete freedom to liberate themselves from the expectations and burdens that they've placed on themselves through the desire to want to nurture and protect. And so they can lead to deep internalization of anger because of the lack of freedom that they have. So Pluto 10th house souls carry a lot of anger in themselves that they need to work through relative to the feeling of suppression of emotions by saying, yeah, I can do it for you, versus maybe saying, yeah, I don't kind of feel like I have to take on everybody's responsibilities. And that's something that I really want everybody to take away from this conversation. If you're a 10th house soul or are working with a client, is that you are also learning how to recognize what type of responsibility to take. You're not here to take all of it. You know, you can actually say no. That is a very integral part of this experience. So learning to recognize what type of responsibility you want to put on yourself so that you don't develop the internalization of wanting to combust because you feel like there's absolutely no freedom in your life because you're just service to other people in that way. And they can actually create multiple karmic dynamics in which you can't actually serve in a healthy way, which can deeply, deeply traumatize the Pluto 10th house issues, which is my social position and expectations on myself. So how am I defined in the world, right? The judgments from the outside world. And those judgments come from the Libra archetype again. The judgments from others, I did it wrong, the guilt naturally associated with it, the responsibility that's been placed on me now that I don't want. And so therefore I can act in an erratic way that liberates me from the experience, but then nobody trusts me anymore. So therefore I can't have the support of the community that leads me to my natural ascension process. And that leads me then to make decisions in which I have to, abuse people and abuse power as a way of naturally facilitating Mercury retrograde, facilitating this desire for empowerment through the structure. Okay. And then finally, just quickly, the adjustment angles and sextiles. So the adjustment angles are these quincunxes that happen over here. They're 150-degree angles from Capricorn to Gemini. And it's fascinating because Capricorn reflects the nature of time. Gemini reflects the nature of how we collect information and stuff. And when we communicate in a way that has an association with time. So the development of time is actually something of past, present, and future. And that quincunx over there is actually the manifestation of how we define different spaces in time, how we identify different spaces in time. And to me, it's interesting because it's about reflection. To me, when you see the sextile between Capricorn and Pisces, there is a reflection archetype that manifests itself. And the reflection is relative to looking back in time and seeing the decision, seeing the process in which you moved, reflecting on that, and then adjusting your inner reality relative to the insights and wisdom that have come through the reflection. And so Pluto and Capricorn, again, when I talked to you about the trines and I talked to you about the opposition to Cancer, was that emotional shocks that lead to deep inner reflection. Pluto and Capricorn souls need a lot of time for internal reflection as a way of understanding their emotional reality so that they can become more purified in their expression of who they are and not identifying with the outside world as a way of empowerment. I remember the first time that I sat just identifying how I would observe somebody else outside of myself and saying, yes, that's who I would like to be. And then I would go, hold on, I'm following somebody else's dream as a way of seeing success? No, that's not how it is. You got to do it yourself. Self-determination. Okay. And then the other inconjunct is to the Leo archetype and to the Scorpio archetype. And this is the part in which we develop this is like the father and the child, as the Leo archetype is purely subjective, it is still the developmental phase of childlike innocence as a way of being just following our pure bliss, right? As we develop Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sag, we become more conscious of our maturity. So the time that we reach Capricorn, we realize that there is a process of honoring our inner child through being the captain of our ship. So the Pluto 10th house soul is deeply, deeply learning how to nurture their own inner child, how to nurture their own inner gifts. And so when you get older in life, you are pursuing the creative, Leo, expression of maturity. So it's the expression of maturity. It's the creative intelligence that manifests through this inconjunct there. It's how the parent, Capricorn, fathers the child, Leo, and how the child gives empowerment to the Capricorn archetype, because the Capricorn archetype essentially is just the rules and regulations, and it's very cold. And when Pluto 10th house souls, they can get into a state in which they're intensely depressed because there's no joy in their lives. And the reason why is because there's so much responsibility that they don't even have enough freedom to do anything with their time. And so that leads to this monotone experience of wake up, do this, do this, do this, do this. So there is a necessity in a higher state of developing the relationship of what is nurturing their inner child. So that's why Pluto 10th house souls on a karmic level, like Jeffrey talks about, and I know I've had this, both dynamics, is that they will manifest a parent that will support them in every way possible. And they'll also manifest a parent as well, either or both, like in my case, in which the parents don't agree on the nature of the child's decisions and judge the child's actions, leaving this deep emotional imprinting within the Pluto 10th house soul of, you know, expectations placed on them too young. So growing up too old, growing up too young, not being able to feel as if they can just relax and chill out for one day. I've spoken to many souls with strong Capricorn where I've told them to just, like, you know, sit in front of the TV for like a day, and every single time their mind says, oh, you've got to be doing this, go, no, I'm just going to be sitting on the couch. Because there is a need for relaxation with the Capricorn archetype. It can't just all be work, 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 which is one of the reasons why that Cancer archetype is so incredibly important. They need to come back down off the ladder and into their home and just kind of like nurture that place as a reflection, and then come back out into the world, come back into the home, nurture their emotions, come back out into the world, and progressively do that until eventually their garden is nurtured to the point where it nourishes themselves fully. And this is the intention here with the reflection through Gemini and through the following of the heart in Leo, the empowerment process through Scorpio, and the internal spiritualization through Pisces. Okay. Some keywords quickly: structure, maturity, depression, I said again because of monotone, time, personal self-responsibility, social leadership, emotional suppression, reflection and hindsight, and of course, domination and control. Okay. So again, thanks for watching this. So I'd love to hear everybody's kind of like, I know there's maybe like only 15 minutes left of talking, but anybody that wants to open up or have any questions for me, I'd be happy to respond to that. Or I could go to my own chart, I suppose.
Simon, thank you so much. That was so thorough, so deep, amazing. You explained everything so well. Thanks so much. It's beautiful. Any
Cool,
questions?
That's fantastic.
I think I'm going to need to up my volume over here. No, it's all full.
Simon, I'm a good Gemini with a question. This is
Yes.
Tashi. Hi. Can you talk about how the Pluto Capricorn archetype is working out in the world now?
Yes.
And the polarity point for all of us with Cancer. I'm curious about that.
Okay. So let's hit something that's really home for a lot of souls that are on the call today. Donald Trump. Okay. Generally speaking, him coming into power was something that wasn't really thought of. Okay. And I feel that the Pluto's transit through Capricorn over its own south nodes, and of course the polarity point being in Cancer, and the context of them being cardinal signs, is that there was a deep initial change within the way in which we emotionally are relating to ourselves as human beings. Okay. And the way that we emotionally relate to ourselves through the social structures, as well as the political structures, through a soul like Donald Trump coming into power and representing what he represented. Not only is he not a politician, but his path to that experience was unexpected. And then all of a sudden it's just arrived, right? So immediately we've got now a president in America that doesn't even follow the structure in which it was in the past. So on one level, we've been having, all of us on the world have been having these intense conversations around how we feel about this, what does it mean, and so on and so forth, which of course has been stimulated by this Pluto transit. I also feel that the nature of how we as souls have been able to connect has become so much more profound with the onset of the internet. And it's not a coincidence that Uranus and Neptune made that connection in Capricorn that set the acceleration for this internet age to become available. And for us to sit here today as Pluto transits through Capricorn, and for us to be able to be embraced by our tribe, that I would have never known that somebody like Linda would have existed, or Wendy, or Liana, or you, or anybody else for that matter, where I was, because not only would I never had the opportunity to have a conversation like this with this internet technology and meet everybody, but to be embraced with souls that would be thinking along the same lines as that I would be thinking is something that's very profound. So not only how do I emotionally relate to myself, but how we are organizing ourselves as individuals and reflecting the onset of the Aquarius age as a way of tribes and groups forming, and the way that we see ourselves. Cancer, the emotional relationship to ourselves and how we see ourselves, how the whole entire globe is seeing itself in a completely different way. And that change, that shift that I felt was the onset with Uranus transiting through Aries in 2012, that of course began to make these squares to Pluto, right? The initiation of that. And just the whole onset of how we emotionally relate to ourselves is, to me, the biggest thing here. And there's so many more layers. You can talk about the nothing's coming to mind at this point in time because of Mercury, but does that kind of like answer that or respond to in a way that gives a very clear perspective, but not babbling on too much?
Excellent.
Things like climate change is an example as well. How many souls realize that the way in which we now have to orientate ourselves to the way that we govern ourselves? So now we're beginning to make choices in our lives where we need to take more responsibility, Pluto and Capricorn, for our choices and actions. How the collective unconscious through the media has become more even available to us. How much fear propaganda is out in the world. How many more people are aware of how governmental structures influence the world through their agendas that we know are not really always going to be about the security of the human beings, that are saying, we're powerless in this situation. We would want to be empowered in this situation. We want to be nurtured in this situation. How many fracturing is taking place in which little small communities are trying to break away from the matrix control, as it were. And I hate to use those terminology, but again, the structures.
Yeah.
And the whole way in which we are defining ourselves as human beings and relating. There's so much more nurture. There's so much more care. It's all going about green and all of this stuff. And there's so much responsibility that we're needing to take relative to our actions. And a lot of people are stepping up and saying, hey, this is not how we want to treat Mother Earth, as an example.
Yes, that makes sense. Thanks, Simon. So any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Simon.
Cool.
Simon, can you speak briefly about the Moon and Saturn in the chart and how they would affect, add to the Pluto Cap and Cancer archetype?
Yes, that's a really, really awesome question. Thank you so much for bringing it up. I love that, because understanding the Moon and Saturn archetypal structure in somebody's chart with the Pluto 10th house soul is very important, because when we're looking at the structures, Saturn, that condition the soul, the nature of that Pluto 10th house is going to be very available, like, to them, right? So like in my case, and maybe if you've got like a quick second, I'll show you my own personal chart over here. Okay. So yes, this is my chart. Thank God I didn't put on somebody else's. I know I cleared out everything. Anyway, okay. So here's my Saturn in the chart. You can see that I've got a very loaded 10th house experience. So you can see, for me, these Zoom meetings are a very big deal for me, because not only am I here to communicate something that's Plutonic, but it also brings me great chi and prana as a way of structuring it. Now, here's my Saturn in the 10th house Scorpio, okay? And my moon sign sits in the 5th house, Gemini. So my mom and dad got married, and they had me, and then literally 5 years later, they split up. And when Pluto, which is now here at 29 degrees, moved over my Saturn and Sun sign, that's when they split up. And I literally had a splitting of fathers, right? Saturn in 10th house, like the abandonment of the father and the loss of the father, and then the osmosis with the new dad that came into my life that influenced my life for almost 20 years. Okay, so that's what I meant about the duality around having a father that did support me and the other one that kind of like did but didn't. And anyway, now with this moon sign sitting in the 5th house, you can see that like I'm here to absolutely creatively express what I feel in my heart, and especially around the moon in Gemini, like I need to make the connection. And Mercury, that is ruling my moon over here, you can see that I'm here to communicate this in a massive way. But there is a kind of woundedness with the Chiron, okay, that makes an inconjunct to Pluto. So the Saturn archetype plays out in my life as this deep internal growth process. Saturn reflects the emotional growth of becoming my own parent. So Pluto and Mercury is there as how do I give power to my own voice? How do I give power to my own creative self-actualization? And how do I become my own parent? Because both parents, funnily enough, that came into my life, the one that was my actual father and my stepdad, both symbolized to me the past. They both symbolized archetypal dynamics in which are complete abandonment, because the one parent was completely disempowering to me, that led me to have all of these squares to the nodes and the Virgo guilt and shame and nonsense that I carry with it, but also the complete powerness to be able to be in my own authority. So I'm here, literally, you can see the manifestation of these inconjuncts between the 10th house and the 5th house. And of course, then again, the second, the third, Gemini and Scorpio and Gemini in the 10th house. Like, I'm here to communicate my own like authority, my own father figure, and to empower myself through that. So my Saturn growth, relative to Linda's question, is emotional identification with my own empowerment, and then to be able to emotionally relate to my own inner child, and then connect the two as a way of empowering my greatest destiny, or the gift, Pluto conjunct the sun. I mean, if it's not clear there, I don't know what is, but it's pretty fascinating to really see this happening. So I have things like raising vibrations, and which is a manifestation of this. And every single day of my life, I'm having to take responsibility for clients and people that are coming through to me that are opening up their soul, because evolutionary astrology will expose you, and talk about the nature of the dynamics. And I have a huge responsibility with that, you know, in that sense. And we all do as astrologers. But for me, obviously, that's a deep internal process in which, how do I relate to people? How do I communicate? How do I emotionally relate? I think that's something that's definitely been the most intense lesson for me over the last 3 years, is the Pluto 10th house souls, Saturn and Moon. How do I emotionally relate to somebody and to the client as a way of being able to connect? Because my soul carries that deep feeling of disconnect due to many lifetimes of too much intellectual behavior. So hopefully that kind of like, again, gives that Pluto conjunct Mercury expression of depth there without being too over the top.
Great, Simon. That was fantastic. Thank you. Wendy, go ahead. Wendy?
It's just saying a microphone doesn't work.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll relay to you the chat box message. Just one moment. Wendy says it makes her think about the empty leg of Cancer during the Pluto-Uranus squares, which is being fostered now, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Jupiter's in Libra, right? So it's squaring Pluto, it's opposing Uranus. And what's being left? What's being left right at the bottom is that Cancer archetype, in which the whole entire way, I mean, like I said, this last full moon that happened, did everybody just like sail through it? Or did you at least at one point get triggered where emotions came to the surface, where you recognize these deep internal crystallizations of past experiences? Pluto through Capricorn. Capricorn reflects crystallization of things that happened in time. And then when you kind of like have them come up again, they're in the same process. So when you're 5 years old and your dad shames you, as an example, and you're 35 and you can't understand why you feel the shame towards an experience, it's not because that moment was happening, it's because it's crystallized in the emotional body when you were that young. This full moon, this whole entire Pluto through Capricorn transit for all of us is deeply, deeply, deeply bringing out all of the fear and all of the stuff out of the structures of our bones, literally, as Jeffrey talked about. You know, when Pluto transits the 10th house, the whole entire feeling of your stability is lost, because it's like, you know, you're having to get centered within yourself. And a lot of people, I mean, intensely amounts of people, because of the work that I do, revealed to me how much of their internal reality was so unstable, because this full moon had just hit these cardinal points, not only activating Pluto, but exactly like Wendy's saying, that empty part of Cancer. You know, remember when Jupiter moved through Cancer in 2013, 2014? I think that was probably one of the most busiest times for every astrologer out there, because it was like everybody was just nauseated by the experience of their emotions coming to the surface. And for us, only now as a collective, Pluto through Capricorn, realizing that for the last 6,000 years, we carry all of this stuff around being patriarchal and saying, no, if you have emotions, you're not strong enough, you know, or going to war. Think about the people that went to war, the Pluto 10th house souls that naturally would have wanted to go to war and be the commanding chiefs. And they sit in that situation, they have to completely suppress their emotional reality as a way of survival. So the whole entire emotional dysfunction that the collective carries regarding our unprocessed material, and you know, this is what that Pluto's transit's doing. It's just going like, look, dude, we have so much unprocessed material we've got to work through, and I'm going to bring it all up. And eventually at some point, we'll begin to emotionally relate to ourselves in a new way in which we recognize that the body is a very, very important vehicle. So we change our diets, as an example. We eat less food that's microwaved, you know, all of this type of stuff. So I've got on my soapbox, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Yeah, Wendy said everyone is talking about Pluto but not Cancer, and she has Saturn in the 10th house opposite her Pluto in the 4th house, so she can totally relate to it.
Yeah, completely. And one thing I wanted to say was safety and security. Safety and security. Look at what's happening in the world right now in terms of the propaganda that is being spread in the world. Safety and security. How safe do you feel? Clarity points of Pluto through Cap. Cancer archetype. Now, pardon me, when we had Trump come in, many, many people felt their security threatened because it was like, what's going on here, all right? The structures, those boundaries, those little things, the railings that we're holding on to are completely destroying themselves and falling apart. And all of a sudden we have nothing here and everybody's freaking out because we don't have anything to grab on, and we've got to develop that internal security within ourselves. So that Cancer archetype, that polarity point is huge. So we see communities like this manifest as a way of saying, hey guys, like let's organize together and feel safe amongst these groups and talk about things.
Yes, I see it as very exciting, actually. Opening up into something new, yes. Yes. Okay, Simon, any final thoughts, and then we'll have to wind down?
Nope, I'm pretty much filled out with all words.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and I'll just unmute everyone and they can just tell you how they felt about the meeting. Okay.
Cool.
Go.
That was great.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. It was wonderful.
Simon.
I appreciate every single one of you for coming here and listening to me babble and so on and so forth.
You didn't babble.
That's good babble.
Nonsense.
That's amazing.
Structured
Okay.
babbling.
Yeah, right?
Thanks.
Cool.
Okay, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.